There's an eventual example involving humans and possibly animals, wolves, howling, birds chirping, and no pun intended for those who listen and observe now. An eventual example involving those who make limits, require rules, and control freedom using power and intelligence, brilliantly and geniusly using memory, books and teachings and theories and philosophies talked about in Karl Marx and Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud and Frantz Fanon. When psychiatry, in other words, and the psychologists who practice strategies talked about in universities and colleges, teachers and doctors and surgeons, social workers and counselors, landlords and managers in their system have success with their processes, and wolves are no longer wild and endangered, and instead used to sedate and imprison those who disagree with their words and their dominance of their gesture and their behavior, dialect and their language and their linguistics and their sound now. And unfortunately also, possibly after leaders and community leaders and elders and surgeons and miracle healers have stopped racism and made suffering only a minimum information statistic in a classroom where a student learns about colonialism, death and dying, but not Tibetan Buddhism now. There's currently, to be more clear and concise, prisons and jails, apartment buildings on Capitol Hill, in Seattle, Washington, where humans no longer have and must do what those drug dealers, those cartel economic entrepreneurs request and require now. And more clearly and repetitively, a group, Black Lives Matter, has worked with Antifa, has worked with the extremists, has worked with politics, activists, and politicians to eloquently, calmly, and within their ethics of their justice and their laws of free services and money and dollars and cents now have reduced from a larger human population on an object they also call a name, a word, a sound, a noise, a E, an A, and an R, and a T, and an H. Now, building rockets at SpaceX, Tesla's in Elon Musk's garage. And talked about in Jeff Bezos' interviews where he started in his garage, in his office, in his handmade sign called Amazon now. And those who aren't a part of a new, better civilization, a more equal and fair, restricted and controlled, and social, and all of the other parts of a complexity science has said solved mathematically with equations and algorithms and artificial intelligence, neural networks at MIT, and the University of Washington Huskies, making self and ego, behavior, experimental, posture, gesture, mood and color, and last, to not be called a fascist now, immediately, in emotion, involving fake meat, wealthy donors and charities from rich folks and peoples and communities now. Google, Facebook, Microsoft, YouTube, Twitter, engineers and technicians of software development and program updaters for an object, on an object, in outer space, far from Mars where Elon Musk wants to retire, safely landing and living in a further distribution of humans in a galaxy. His physics and Jeff Bezos' rockets and Blue Origin launching and flying in the night with fire and geometry a consciousness, they are slowly, though tenaciously and focused and concentrated and quickly eliminating from a discussion within neuroscience as a mystery currently now. And these humans, these racists, these white supremacist extremists, and these unwilling gender neutral participants every night have to say to the wolf, I need a meal, and die from the vice president's command to the soldier warrior in a location similar to Capitol Hill in Seattle, Washington State now. And within their religion, and multicultural diversity, there's no longer a problem with wildlife. And more importantly, unfortunately, and worst of all, those people they couldn't convince to follow them and do what they want and explain as correct, intellectual, and above all else, intelligent, to finally see what they describe as privilege, legalized drugs, and their woke, cultural, artistic ballet. And babies born within families allowed to be whoever they want, physically, spiritually, and stronger and more powerful than the hunter who only wants what's been declared illegal by Mr. Bill Gates, retired, and providing donations and charity and foundation money in a multi-million-dollar house, undoubtedly bought after moving away from Mercer Island, where he formulated mathematics and logic and analyzed climate change and what's needed now to meet the goals he says, end suffering and begin an infinity with electric yachts and airplanes, robots and sex machines, Grubhub delivery, and those immigrants and those Ubers and those Lyfts cooking in those kitchens filled with ghosts and no patrons. Now,